Would you like to know what the living expenses are for a family of 4 living in Australia in 2023? Well then, keep watching.
Hello world, wake me up to another good morning, time to go. Oh, we are all looking for adventure.
Hi there and welcome back to today's video. In this episode, I'm going to tell you all about what it will cost your family of 4, in other words, 2 by 2, 2 adults, 2 children, to have a decent living in Australia and what you can expect in terms of how much you can afford and what you'll be able to do when making your new life in this amazing country. You can also download a free copy of my living expenses if you go to www.shaminitv.com.au/137. I have helped thousands of people in the past get what they want in life, and I would love to help you too today. But before I continue, have you subscribed to this channel yet? If not, hop down below and make sure that you watch our videos that are similar to this one, because it will just help you gain so much information about the road that's lying ahead. So the next episode will be about how much it will cost your family to get set up in Australia if you decide to move over with only your suitcases. I also have some super exciting news, and that is that we have started a new company that can help you land a sponsored job in Australia. That's right, my friend. We are specifically looking for mining, trades, and health-related occupations at the moment. So if you do anything like a registered nurse or a doctor or a dentist or a mining engineer or a civil engineer or a plumber, electrician, boilermaker, rigger, welder, this is for you, my friend. Hop onto www.shaminitv.com.au/sponsorships and then add your details in there, and we can let you know as soon as we have another position available that might be the one that's going to bring you over to Australia. Okay, let's roll into the video. Australia is known worldwide to have a relatively high cost of living. And of course, it changes depending on where you live within Australia. It's a massive country. So which city you decide to settle in will have an influence on your cost of living. But that is mainly based on the accommodation cost, because most other expenses in Australia are the same whether you live in Perth, in Sydney, in Melbourne, or in Darwin. It'll also depend on what your interests are in terms of how much you would like to expend on things, whether you like expensive hobbies like playing golf all weekend, or whether you want to go on holiday a lot of times. That, of course, makes a massive difference on your cost of living. But the costs that I will be portraying to you today will be for a general 2 by 2 kind of family that, let's put it this way, will be looking out for what their expenses are. You will recall my previous cost of living video. It was about 2 years ago. And then, my friend, we have worked out that it is about $5,500 for an average 2 by 2 family to make it in Australia per month. And because of so many things that's been happening in the world, COVID, the war, just so many unforeseen things, it means that the costs of things everywhere in the world and also in Australia have gone up quite considerably. And now it is a whopping, drum roll, $8,300 a month. Are you sitting down? I know. All right, depends on what you're earning or what you will be earning. It might be that $8,300 a month to you sounds like, too easy. But my friend, we've tried to take what an average reasonable cost would be. And the biggest driver of that increase has been the accommodation cost. And this time for this video, we are basing the general accommodation costs on an average kind of expense that you would expect to have if you were living in one of the cities on the eastern side of Australia. And with cities, I mean Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, one of those, versus previously it was based on what it would have cost you if you were living in Perth 2 years ago, and accommodation there is cheaper than on the East Coast, generally speaking. But of course, you can choose where you want to live. You can go and live in a very affordable area. You can go and live regionally in Australia as well. That will help a lot in terms of bringing costs down. Or you can choose to live on the outskirts of a city. Our cost is based on somebody who might be having a job, say, relatively close to the city, and you will be commuting with the train or the bus to the CBD if you're working in the city center for about 30 to 40 minutes. But yes, everything has gone up, and groceries in itself has gone up at about 30% over just the past year. So you can see how it went from $5,500 to $8,300. It's quite a big climb, but mostly accommodation and groceries that has a big influence on that. But again, these are just rough estimates, and it will all depend on your family circumstances and the way that you choose to live your life. You could do it really al cheapo, or you can be on the expensive side if you wish. Okay, so the first expense that we have is the medical fund. Now in Australia, it works interesting. It's really the difference in funds, medical fund, health fund as we call it in Australia, health fund, in South Africa, medical aid is more commonly known as. It is about $380 a month for a family. It changes a little bit depending on where you live in Australia, but generally speaking, $380 a month is what you'll be paying for a family. And whether there's 4 or 5 or 6 people in your family, that actually does not make a difference, which is quite interesting. In Australia, it is based either that you have a single policy for one person, or a couple's policy, or a family policy. And so $500 is not something you'll see because you have more kids. It stays at $380 regardless of whether you have 1, 2, 3, or 5 children. And then we've pretty much worked out about $126-ish for your pharmacy expenses. That's if you want to buy general kind of stuff. This is not for chronic illnesses. This is just for general add-ons that you might have as a family of 2 adults and 2 children. Now, the groceries, as I said, has gone up quite a bit. Last time we said about $1,500, but this time we'll say it's about $2,000 groceries per month. And yes, that is definitely, it has been reflected in everything that we see around us, but the availability of things like certain kind of groceries that need to come from elsewhere, and the fact that there has been a massive problem in the Ukraine, and a lot of the products that come from the Ukraine has been struggling to get out or just not able to be produced anymore. That has had a very big influence on groceries worldwide. And of course, petrol and the things about COVID, that there was not enough people to be working, to be producing the things that we needed. So the demand has gone up, and it skyrocketed a lot of the prices. We've also taken about $350 a month for dining and takeout. Now in Australia, that is something that is generally speaking much more expensive than it would be, say, in a third world country, because labor costs are really expensive in Australia. And so dining out, it means that there's somebody that's making your food for you and bringing it to your table potentially, and that means it just gets quite a bit more expensive, versus whereas you were going to buy the groceries yourself and eat at home, it is a much more affordable option. So 6 times in a month comes down to 1.5 a week, average about $350 for your dining and takeout. If you have mobile phones, like most of us have, it'll be about $300 for your plan. That means it's your handset. In other words, you're paying for your iPhone or whatever it is that you choose to have, as well as the data and the phone calls that go along with it. In Australia, these plans are really good. We never run out of data. Okay, we have substantial data on our phone, but it's such a common data plan that we have, which is pretty much the second lowest one, and we hardly ever run out. And we have 4 kids in our household streaming from our data package. So yeah, I think you can budget for $300 a month for 2 mobile plans, and that should last you really well in terms of any downloads. We never switch off our downloads when we go out of the house. We keep on streaming anywhere that we go because it is just so affordable, because it's included in our package. You could probably bargain on about $150 for your electricity a month. And of course, that'll change if you have solar panels or if you don't have solar panels. And it'll also change depending on where you are in the country, whether you're in a very warm place and run your air conditioning all the time, or in a cold place and you want to run your heater more often if you don't run your heater on gas. And so $150 post solar would be about the energy bill. But yes, energy has gone up quite a bit, and it depends on your family's usage. And about $150 a month that we are budgeting in this episode for your gas for a family of 4 if you want to heat up during the winter, We have natural gas in Australia, and that is amazing to be able to use. Not all houses have it, and not all areas have natural gas, but it is something that works really well if you have access to it, because running a heater of gas works much more affordable than to be a heater that runs on electricity. And also, of course, a lot of the stove tops in Australia are gas stoves. So that's another thing. If you like to cook, if you have a family that needs feeding, then that's where you'll be running into more expenses in the gas department. And of course, also another thing is the water heater that we have for showering, bathing, making anything warm. And it depends on what kind of water heater, or in South Africa, we used to say geyser, which is not a commonly known name for everybody, because a geyser in some countries might mean an old person. So be careful in how you use that word. But a water heater is also something that's run off gas, generally speaking. And if you have a water heater that is used in an on-demand system, in other words, it only heats up the water once you start using it, then that works out more affordable, generally speaking, as well as one of those containers which are kept warm all the time, regardless of whether you're using the water at that stage or not. Then we've budgeted about $220 for water a month for your family. So that means all the water that you use through the taps, and of course also your reticulation outside for your garden. So $220 and you are sorted for your water. If you are paying rates, if you own a home, you can budget about $170 a month for your rates. And again, it depends on how big your house is and in which local municipality your house is based, because the rates are different in different areas. But on average, let's say about $170 a month if you have about an $800,000 home that you've bought. Of course, if you're renting, you are not paying rates, because that is what the owner pay. However, it's generally assumed that the rent that you pay actually cover for the rates too. So you don't have to worry about that though. You'll just have to worry if you rent a place about your monthly rent fee. But if you own a home, you'll also be having the taxes that you need to pay. And if you decide to rent a home, we think that about $2,600 a month, in other words, about $650 a week, is something that's very reasonable for you to expect to pay for a family of a 4x2 house, or a 2x2 family, but in a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. $650, depending again on where you go and live in the suburb. Generally speaking, in Australia, the closer you live to the CBD, in other words, the city centre, the more expensive it gets. And of course, if you live by the ocean or right next to a river, those kinds of things also jack up the prices for the area. But in a general sense, the closer you are to the city centre, the more expensive your rent will get, or your homes will get, where it's the opposite in South Africa, where generally speaking, the closer you are to the CBD, like in Joburg, the cheaper it gets, because nobody wants to be there. In Australia, it's the other way around, because most businesses are located in the CBD. It means that if you live closer to the CBD, you also have a shorter distance to travel. So the areas closest will be the most expensive. And as you go further away, then it becomes much more affordable. So if you're happy to travel over an hour a day, then of course you can go and live in the outskirts of your city, and it'll just be much more affordable. But $650 we feel are very reasonable for an average household to be expecting to pay per week for your rent, which is about $2,600 a month. Then daycare. If you have a child that needs to go to daycare, if mum and dad's working, then you can expect to pay about $1,100 a month for your daycare. This is after you have received your CCS, which is the acronym for Childcare Subsidy that the government provides for permanent residents or citizens if you live in Australia. And that is an amazing help from the government, because it costs about $110 a day, a little bit more in some, a little bit less in others, but around about $110 a day per child. And if you do get your CCS, depending on how much you earn, but generally speaking, you can expect to get about half of that back. So you'll pay around $55 a day. And so if you work it out, For a full-time load, then it's about $1,100 a month that you can be expecting to pay for childcare expenses. Then if you have a school-aged child and you decide to put them in public school, which is absolutely fine because the public schools in Australia are amazing. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, okay? The public schools in Australia are amazing. If you are after a traditional curriculum, in other words, the kind of curriculum that you generally probably would have been having yourself if you grew up in your country, then putting your children to public school in Australia is a great choice because it's free, essentially. There's such a small contribution that you have to pay. If you're a permanent resident citizen, it works out about $17 a month that you actually have to pay for your child's education in a public school. Can you believe it? $17 a month for incredible education that you can get here. But also you can choose to put your child in a private school, of course. And if you choose a private school, then of course the fees become much higher and it varies. It can be anything from $5,000 a year to $25,000 a year of school fee costs, depending on the age of your child and also which school you choose to put your child in. But let's say $500 a month per child. And so if you put 2 children in primary school, you'll be paying about $1,000 a month for your children's education if you put 2 children in a private school. Then we'll be looking at your vehicle registration costs. It's really not that expensive. If you look at it monthly, it's $75 a month, give or take, and it depends on your car, what you have. But that's what you can expect to pay your fees, your taxes, whatever you want to call it, your car license in Australia. Then petrol, my friend, has gone up considerably. Again, this is a difficult one to be ascertaining or providing an estimate on because it depends on how much you drive. If you drive 2 hours and to work and back every day, then of course it's going to be very different. But if you are an average household that pretty much just drive to school and back, and assuming school is just in your suburb, maybe you drive to the train station and then you take the train from there to go to the city to work and take the train back and then drive that small distance from the train station to your house again. Those kinds of small distances, just groceries here and there, maybe sport on the Saturday. I think you can expect to pay around $100 for petrol per car per month, which is really not that bad. However, taking into consideration how much petrol has gone up, then it can be really costly for your family if you all add it up. Another thing you need to pay for, my friend, is the fact that you want to be able to drive. So to have a driver's license, that costs money too. And we pay our driver's licenses or renew it every 5 years in Australia. And if you work it out back to a monthly cost, it's going to be $6 a month for you to have your driver's license over the 5 years. So really not that bad. But before we continue, are you following along? Right, hell yes in the comments below if you're still with us and you are interested in hearing more of what's coming of the other expenses. Okay, for the insurance, we have different kinds of insurance, of course. Life insurance is the first one. And again, it depends on how much you want to insure your life for. If you only want to have $100,000 of life insurance or $1 million or $10 million of life insurance, that's all dependent. But that is usually, life insurance is usually included in your superannuation contribution that you do. And superannuation here in Australia is what South Africans would call the pension fund. So in Australia, they talk about super, and you can pay a little bit additional depending on your age, of course, for your life insurance. You can also take out additional life insurance with another company if you want to top up the life insurance that you get out of your superannuation, generally speaking. Home and contents insurance, again, depends on how many things you want to insure in your house. But we say $90 a month would be about reasonable for a 4x2 household contents that you might consider insuring. A little bit of televisions, a bit of a computer here and there, maybe a bit of jewelry, but not over the top. If you have really expensive things that you generally keep in your house, you might want to up that one. Then to insure your car, it will be about $45 a month. Again, depending on what model, make, year it is. That'll go up and down, but budget for about $45 a month. You can also take out pet insurance in Australia, which if you have pets and you don't like expending money when you go to the vet, I definitely suggest that you look into getting pet insurance. but pet insurance can be really expensive in Australia. That said, going to the vet is also really expensive in Australia. So it's like a catch-22. Which one is more expensive? You will never know because it depends on why you go to the vet and if you go to the vet often. And unfortunately, the point of insurance is to cover you for those unforeseen things. So unfortunately, beforehand, you won't know whether you're going to need the insurance or not. But when you do need it, you are usually so thankful that you did take it out. So that's up to you. But pet insurance can be really expensive. So are going to the vet. Up to you which one you're going to use. But having an animal, definitely something to be taking into consideration. Also, the thing that we usually have because of the advent of the internet are subscriptions. So a lot of you might be having a YouTube account, for example, and of course you can run a free YouTube account that costs you $0, or you can take out a family membership as we have done because we really don't like seeing the ads, and so we opted to pay $30 a month, and that is for the premium YouTube plan. And then we have all of our family members, we're a family of 6, own YouTube profiles, not accounts, because they're part of our one family account. And they can access their own videos that they like to watch and not be bombarded with ads. Because if you've started getting used to not watching ads or not seeing ads, then the moment that you go back to seeing ads, it's really frustrating, my friend. So yes, $30 a month and you are sorted for YouTube. If you have a subscription like I do, for example, to exercise and part of my health routine, then you can expect to pay about $10 a month if you pay for that subscription annually. The one that I really enjoy is called centrecom, and that's Chris Hemsworth's subscription service. So they have exercise routines every day that you log on. It's based on like a calendar look. So if you log on for Monday, today is Tuesday, then I get a specific exercise routine that's been tailored for my needs. I can go and pick whether I like to do more HIIT type of exercises or weight training. You can also choose to sign up to something like Foxtel, which is South Africa's got DSTV. We have Foxtel in Australia, and that is just a TV streaming program where you can watch things like Sky News and Fox News and BBC and Discovery Channel and MTV. Does it still exist? Let me know down below. Does MTV still exist? It probably does. I haven't watched it for so long. Anyway, you can probably bargain at about $60 a month if you want to use that and watch all those kids channels as well that you usually get with that. Or you can do something like Netflix of Stan. Netflix and Stan is a very common one. You also get the Disney Channel these days. And what are the other ones? Also, I think Amazon has their own streaming channel as well these days. So yeah, if you want to do something like that instead, you'll be looking at about $20 a month for those. If you want to have your hair done, like me, I have my hair done every 5 weeks where I go for a color, and I don't cut it at the moment because I'm growing a little bit. But you can probably expect to pay upwards from $180 for a color by itself. So if you go every 6 weeks, and if you add in a cut, so maybe budget for about $180 a month if you include the cut, and then that will be your expenses for your haircut. A men's haircut costs about $35, I'd say. And they are very popular, the barbers. So often when I walk past a men's barber, there would be queues out the door of men waiting to have their hair cut at the men's barbers, and they're really funky looking these days. It's a treat. They even give you like nice coffee and so on at the men's barbers. So yeah, that's what you can expect to pay for your haircut. Then kids activities, soccer. If your children like to do soccer or rugby or whatever it might be, it's about $45 per child per month. And we work it out per month. So you'll have to times by 12 to get what it will cost you for the year. It's about $500 or so for a year for soccer. But you don't play for the year, of course. You play for the season. But we've averaged it out over the month, over like months in the year. So yeah, it's about $500, $600 depending on what sport activity your child decides to do. And yes, it is very expensive in Australia to do sport or extracurricular activities. And most often the sport is not included in the school curriculum. It's something that you have to do additional, whereas in South Africa, we used to do sport as a part of what the school does. Some private schools here do have sport included as part of what the school offers. But even so, generally speaking, if your child likes to do something like, let's say they really enjoy playing rugby and they are serious about it, then you will probably still take your child, even though your child's private school might offer rugby, you will still probably take your child to a club to go and train with a club after school hours, because the club stream is the most common way in which children in Australia do sports. If you do swimming lessons, you can probably work at about $80 a month for your child to go swimming lessons. And that's based on if you go once a week, so about $20 per lesson. Or if you do tennis, it's about $40 per week if you have a private coach for 30 minutes. Or you can go for a group lesson, and that is $10 for 30 minutes if you are part of a number of other children receiving the same lesson, as I said, or you can pay $40 for a half an hour for a private lesson for tennis. So things that we are not including in this estimate for the month is travel expenses in terms of flying somewhere, because of course if you fly once, it's a massive influence on your budget. To give you an idea, if you fly from East Coast to East Coast, let's say you fly from Sydney to Melbourne or Brisbane to Melbourne, or one of those East Coast related cities to each other, you can probably look at about $350 return for a trip like that, a round trip. However, if you fly West Coast to East Coast, which is much further, it's a very long distance, and if you didn't know, go and look at the map to go and see how incredibly big Australia is. So much bigger than what you would think usually. And it's about $800 for a Perth to Brisbane flight, because it's about a 6-hour flight. Yes, my friend, it's about as long as it is for you to fly overseas. So yes, you'll probably have to work at about $800 per round trip between, let's say, Sydney and Perth, or just staying on the East Coast, it's more than half of that, or less than half of that, $350 for a return trip, say Melbourne, Sydney, or Sydney, Brisbane, or one of those. But we haven't brought that into the consideration of the $8,300 of the total monthly cost. You'll have to add that in if you are expecting to fly or fly regularly. And of course, another thing we haven't included is the cost of clothing, because it depends on how much you want to shop, and whether you like shopping, and whether you like to shop second-hand clothes or new clothes. In Australia, second-hand shopping is actually a thing, and it's a very popular thing. It becomes like I bought my things second-hand almost. It's really cool, and there are many shops that you can shop second-hand at, and some of them are branded as second-hand shops, but they're actually not really second-hand. So TK Maxx, if you've been to the UK, you would be well aware of TK Maxx as well. We also have TK Maxx in Australia the last few years, and we have things called like the Salvation Army, or any of those kind of op shops where people donate their second-hand clothing to the shop, and then the proceeds of the sale of those clothes goes towards usually supporting people in need. And there you have it, my friend, $8,344 to be precise, which includes your medical, your utilities, your internet and mobile, groceries, rent, insurance, your vehicle registration, petrol, subscriptions, kids' activities, and that is a lot of money. So yes, be very careful in choosing what you want to expend your things on. And also the biggest place where you can save money is if you live towards the outskirts or in a regional town or city instead of living very close to the CBD. And then of course the further away you live, the bigger your houses can be, generally speaking, as well, because the closer to the CBD, the smaller the land sizes get, because people back in the day they used to have very large blocks of land, but because it became so expensive to live close to the city, a lot of those large blocks of lands have been subdivided, and now they might be like 400 square meters per block of land if you're lucky, some 300, some 200 square meters, and then they put little narrow houses up on them. Well, those houses are very smart and very lovely, I get it, but it's just to give you an indication of what you can expect if you go closer to the CBD. If you go further away, then generally speaking, you should have more space and it becomes a bit more affordable. Also remember, it makes a big difference on your children's ages and whether they go to public or private school or daycare or not, because that is a big expense as well. So your groceries, your childcare / schooling fees, if you put in private schools, those are the ones that really can rack up your price of your cost for the month. But it is worth putting your child in daycare for you to go and have a job if that's what it will take. Because yes, initially you might not earn much more than what your childcare will cost you. I know, I've been there. However, if you take your foot out of the workforce, it's generally speaking a lot harder to get back in later on. So if you keep on working, even if you just go to a part-time job, and they're not that easy to get, by the way, it's much easier to get a full-time job than a part-time job. Start full-time and maybe try and scale down part-time later if you can. But I would still suggest that if this is a consideration for you, if you have to choose essentially between working and putting your child in daycare, I would opt for putting my child in daycare because your child are going to have a lot of children to be familiarizing themselves with in the Australian context. They learn so much at daycare. It's incredible the curriculums that they implement, the early learning that they do at daycare centers. It's very controlled. It's very regulated in Australia. The daycare education and environment that your child get, you pay a lot, but you get a really good quality at the end of the day for having put your child there for the day. And they get to socialize, and it gives you an opportunity to provide and contribute to the economy and go out and make some friends. Even though it's at work, it's really important for your mental health to talk to other adults and get out and get to know the new country that you're living in. Something else that you should also think about is buying a car. So you could choose to buy a car when you get here, or you can choose to rent a car, of course. You'll probably be looking at between $30,000 and $35,000 cash for a reasonable small SUV. That should get you maybe like a RAV4, and that's a good well-known car, Toyota RAV4. Or you can probably look at about $560 if you have a car loan. So that will be what you'll be repaying back on your loan, and that's based on a $30,000 car that you buy over 5 years that you take out the loan, and you repay it monthly at 4.5% interest rate. So yes, either $560 a month that you'll be paying for your car loan if you buy a car, or you can buy it outright, about $30,000 to $35,000. There you have it, my friend. I hope this has been informative and that you now know so much more about what you can expect to be paying for in Australia. Also remember, you're going to be earning in dollars, okay? So that changes a lot of things. And that is a video for another day. We will be looking at the 10 most in-demand jobs in Australia in 2023. Keep your eye on the channel for that one to come very soon. Thanks for watching. The question of the day is, let me know below, how much is your family's current grocery bill? That's an interesting topic. Per month. Let us know down below if you're a 2x2 family or a 1 and a 3 or whatever your composition is of your family, and what your general monthly grocery bill is. Would be lovely to share below. And of course, try and work it to dollars if you can, Australian dollars. So or rand, we can understand rand too. It's just easier so that if we look at the comments, then everybody can understand. Everybody else that's watching it can also get an appreciation for what your expenses are at the moment. Remember to submit your expression of interest if you're interested in a sponsorship job. www.shamilytv.com.au/sponsorships with a capital S for sponsorships. And you can let us know what your occupation is, and we'll let you know when we have sponsorships available for your occupation. Share the video, like, subscribe, and remember, my friend, you deserve a life of fairness, freedom, and of opportunity. Until next time, goodbye, my future Australian amigos.